You cannot stop thinking about it. That text you never sent. That show you never finished. That argument you never resolved. It sits in your mind like an open tab you cannot close. There's a scientific reason for this, and once you understand it, you will notice it everywhere. This is the Zeigarnik Effect. In the 1920s, a young psychology student named Bluma Zeigarnik was sitting in a busy cafe in Vienna. She started watching the waiters. They moved between tables, carrying dozens of orders at once. No notepad, no system, just memory. And somehow they remembered every single detail perfectly. But here's where it gets strange. The moment a table paid their bill, something odd happened. The waiter instantly forgot everything about that order. Ask them 5 minutes later what the table had eaten, and they could not tell you. Zeigarnik noticed this pattern and could not let it go. Why would a brain remember something perfectly, only to erase it the second it was finished? She brought this question into the laboratory. In 1927, she designed a series of experiments to test it properly. Participants were given simple tasks, puzzles, small projects, basic assignments. Half of these tasks were allowed to be completed normally. The other half were deliberately interrupted before they could be finished. Then she asked a simple question. Which tasks do you remember best? The results were almost too clean to believe. Participants were nearly twice as likely to remember the interrupted tasks, not slightly better, nearly double. Completed tasks faded from memory almost immediately. Unfinished tasks stayed sharp, detailed, and persistent. Zeigarnik had just uncovered something fundamental about how your brain actually works. She published her findings in 1927 in a paper called On Finished and Unfinished Tasks. At the time, most psychologists were focused purely on behavior, what people did, not why they remembered it. Zeigarnik's research suggested something different, that memory itself was shaped by unresolved tension, not just by repetition or importance. It was a quiet but significant shift in how psychologists understood the human mind. Here's the mechanism behind it. When you begin any task, your brain creates what psychologists called an open loop. This loop generates a kind of mental tension, not something you consciously feel most of the time, but it is there, running quietly in the background. That tension exists for one reason only, to make sure you finish what you started. The moment you complete the task, the loop closes. The tension releases. Your brain files it away and moves on. But if the task is interrupted, the loop stays open. And an open loop does something your brain cannot ignore. It keeps demanding attention over and over, whether you want it to or not. Now think about how many open loops are running in your mind right now. An email you meant to reply to. A goal you started and abandoned. A conversation left unfinished. Each one is quietly pulling at your attention, even when you're trying to focus on something else entirely. Researchers have found this effect extends far beyond waiters and puzzles. A study led by Christine Surek found that unfinished work tasks over a weekend led directly to something called rumination, that constant looping thought pattern that makes it nearly impossible to switch off and relax. You know the feeling, lying in bed, trying to sleep, and your mind keeps circling back to something you never finished. That is not a lack of discipline. That is the Zeigarnik Effect running exactly as designed. Here's where it gets even more interesting. A colleague of Zeigarnik named Maria Ovsiankina discovered something closely related. It is now called the Ovsiankina Effect. Not only do we remember unfinished tasks more vividly, we feel an actual physical urge to go back and finish them. Given the smallest opportunity, people will instinctively return to an interrupted task before starting something new. Your brain is not simply built to remember what is incomplete. It is built to chase completion, almost against your will. This single discovery quietly reshaped entire industries. Television writers learned to end episodes on cliffhangers, because an unresolved story stays in your mind far longer than a resolved one. App designers learned to show progress bars that stop at 99%, because an almost finished task creates unbearable psychological tension. Even social media notifications exploit this exact mechanism. An unread message is an open loop your brain cannot leave alone. None of this is accidental. It is built directly on Zeigarnik's discovery from a cafe in Vienna a century ago. Even the modern to-do list owes something to this research. Simply writing a task down, whether or not you complete it, changes how your brain holds on to it. But here's the most useful part of all this. If open loops create mental tension and completed loops release it, you now have a tool available to you. Researchers have found that you do not always need to finish a task to quiet your mind. Simply making a specific plan for when and how you will finish it can trick your brain into partial closure. Writing it down, scheduling it, naming the exact next step, that alone can quiet the loop, even before the task itself is done. So think about everything currently sitting unfinished in your mind right now. Every one of those loops is real, measurable, documented in psychological research for nearly 100 years. Your brain is not broken for thinking about them constantly. It is doing exactly what evolution built it to do, chasing the thing that is not yet complete. The question now is simple. What open loop has been running quietly in your mind this entire time? And what would it take right now to finally close it?